everybody, my name is André Allard. I am the editor of Les Ailes du Québec, Wings Over Québec. This is the website. I also run a YouTube channel, Les Ailes du Québec. And this is the first emission in English with Wings Over Québec. And today's subject will be this country is not for LCCs. So we're going to talk about Canadian market and LCCs. There are four low-cost carrier that has announced themselves or that are already in operation. So we're going to look into that. But before we do that, I would like to point you at the bottom of the screen here. There's a like button. If you like this episode, you click like. You can also subscribe to the channel, even if it is in French. I'm gonna continue posting English emissions or a version of those of the French channel. Those editions will always have English titles, so they'll be easy to recognize. And well, I'm not asking for charity. Just be generous and click like on the like button. That helps a lot with the YouTube YouTube referencing system. So thank you for clicking. So a few days ago, more than a week ago now, Canadian ultra low cost carrier Lynx Air has announced its intention to start operating in mid 2022. This is the third airlines or low cost operator to announce itself in Canada. The fourth one will be Jetline, who is also planning to start its operation in 2022. Before I go into any of the data of Canadian geography and Canadian market, I want to remind people what makes an airline LCC or ULCC. Okay, first of all, the mother of all LCCs today, or even LCCs, is Southwest Airlines. The business plan of this type of carrier is always the same. One type of aircraft, so in order to save on maintenance costs, training costs, and all that stuff. They only have one class inside the aircraft, so there's only economical class. There's no premium class or business class, and the seat pitch is reduced to its minimums in order to get the maximum people inside the aircraft. So there's only one fare. Usually, in many LCCs or ULCC, the fare only includes the price of the ticket, and sometimes, not always, one hand luggage to be stored in the hopper bins inside the aircraft. You need a luggage to go in the cargo area. Then you pay extra. They also do some point-to-point services. What's that mean? Let's take an example. You want to fly from Montreal to Calgary, and you're taking tickets with an LCC or ULCC that doesn't offer direct flight between Montreal and Calgary. But they do offer flight between Calgary and Toronto, and Toronto and Montreal. You're gonna have to buy two separate tickets. One from Calgary to Toronto and the other one from Toronto to Montreal. What that means is if you lose your connection in Toronto, let's say you've booked yourself didn't book yourself enough time to do the transfer in Toronto, then you're responsible. You lose your second tickets. You're considered late. So the company is not responsible for the connections. You have to manage your connection, and if you lose the luggage there, and if the luggage doesn't make it on time on the connecting flight, it's your responsibility. They don't take any responsibility for delays, flights, missing flights, and missing luggage missing connecting flights. So that's a little tricky stuff. So usually there's no service on board on LCC or ULCC that's are prepaid. You have to pay extra to get beverage, foods inside the aircraft. And there's all all kind of little ancillary fees that you have to pay. As an example, if you want to bring print a boarding pass at the airport, well, you're gonna have to pay sometime up to $25 just to get that boarding pass print. LCCs and new LCCs also never make business with travel agencies or tour operator. They only always sell their own tickets on the website through internet. They don't use other ways of selling tickets, so they don't have to pay a cut or commission to third parties for selling tickets. So that reduces fees. Usually, wages or salaries of the staff are lower on a LCC, ULCC. Usually, it's quite easy to understand that when you start a new one, you have nobody who has 10 years of seniority. So everybody is a junior in the company. So they start at the bottom line. If you compare today's Southwest pilot wage to other with other main line in US, they're pretty much the same. They're pretty close to each other, and now it used to be different, but not anymore. So it depends where you go in the world and how it's managed. But yes, there's a tendency to pay less with LCC and ULCC. The other big thing they do, they try to avoid major airport where the landing fees are higher, and big major airport are already autonomous, self-sufficient. They don't need to attract new carrier by lowering their fees. So what LCCs and ULCCs tend to do, they tend to go to a regional airport that usually belong to a municipalized airport, and those cities or small municipalities, they want to attract carrier because they need the business, and they need the passengers and the tourists to come to their area. So they usually make deals with ULCC, so they fly at their airport with very or none landing fees at all or airport fees at all. That reduce a lot the cost of the operation, especially when you do short flights every day. Many short flights. Airport landing fees or airport fees tends to be take a bigger part into the overall operation cost. So that's a major point. The other thing they also try to avoid is heavy maintenance. Most of the LCCs don't keep their aircraft very long. They tend to order aircraft in big quantities. They put them on lease with a leaser for a period of 7 to 8 years, and once the aircraft is reaching its first D check, they get rid of it. They turn it back to the leaser and they take a new one. That's why they have so many big orders with Airbus and Boeing. It's because not only they have to buy aircraft for the growth, but they gotta replace aircraft that are 6, 7, 8 years old. So they always have brand new aircraft that are pretty cheap to operate. Maybe the cost of owning the aircraft is a little higher, but they're making the calculation that it will be cheaper for them. So basically, that's the model of the LCCs. That's how they work. Typically, they tend to be 30% cheaper in their operating costs than the legacy airlines or the full service airlines. But it's not always. Like we're gonna see a little later in Canada, airport fees, landing fees represent 30 to 40% of the operating cost of an airline, especially on regional routes. And there's not a lot of option for those LCCs in Canada, like I will want to show you soon. So let's take a look at the Canadian geographic specific of Canadian geography. You have this, like you see on the map on the screen now, we have a country that has 9.9 million square kilometers. USA does have 9.8 as an example. Russia is 17 million square kilometers. So that's a pretty wide country with 38 million people living into it. So the size is about the same as the US, but with 1/10 of the population. That's already a big distinction, or not distinction, big difference between the US. But if you look more carefully at the next map, you see there's a red ribbon there. It does represent 150 nautical miles from the US border. It's not perfectly on the scale. I did put it that there to show you that 90% of Canadian populations live 150 nautical miles away from the US border. So even if the country has a decent population, that population is concentrated there in that 150 nautical miles strip. That's quite amazing. So that means on the rest, only 10% of Canadians live away, more than 150 nautical miles away from the US border. Now, think about it. If you're a low-cost customer, every penny counts. So customers for low cost, they do really make, they're usually on a strict budget. They make calculation and they always go for the cheapest. So if you're closer to a US airport than a Canadian airport, and that at that US airport there's a LCC or ULCC that is cheaper than the Canadian one, well, people will move to that airport. As a matter of fact, in 2008, Canadian dollar and US dollar were even. That year alone, more than 1.5 million passengers crossed the Canadian passenger crossed the border to the US to take a US flight just because it was cheaper. So when you think about LCC or Canadian LCC market, you have to consider that in many spots or many places in Canada, Canadian LCCs are under pressure from US LCCs. Now, the other reality, and that's a funny one if you look at that map, I draw a line that at the bottom of it, you're close to Thunder Bay, Ontario, okay? On the right side of that line, or the east side of that line, lives 62% of Canadian population, and on the other line, on the other side, only 38%. Now remember, they're all at the bottom of the Canadian map. So if you look, it's even more strange. Now, funnily, okay, one of the most amazing thing that happens right now, it's all four of Canadian LCCs or ULCCs are located in Calgary on the west side of this. Then we have Flair, we have Lynx that has announced itself, Jet Lines, and Swoop, which belongs to WestJet. All four of them are located in Calgary, Alberta, and that's a strange situation because if you look at the market shouldn't be at airline or LCC shouldn't be on the west side of the country. They should be in the middle of the country. Matter of fact, because if you look at another spread of the Canadian population, that becomes more interesting. Okay, 61% of population is located in two provinces, Ontario, Quebec. The Maritimes, okay, only 7%. The Prairies provinces, the three of them, so that would be Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, 18%. BC, British Columbia, has 14% of the population. And then way up north, look how small the population is. As a matter of fact, if you look in that big rectangular section there, that shows 0.003% of the population. In that area, there's about 130,000 people living on it. That's wide, that is vast. So typically, major airlines won't won't go above that northern line there, and won't go into that 0.003% of population. No, these are specialized regional carrier, usually aboriginal carrier that belong to native people, and these are the ones who give the service over there. On the south or southern part of Canada, it's another business, of course. So if you're trying to decide how and where you're gonna make business in Canada, then you gotta go to the last thing or last important data. Where are those people? Which are the cities in Canada that have sufficient people living there in order to sustain low cost carrier? I have this little table there that shows USA's 10 biggest cities, or I should say urban area. It's not only the city; it's the metropolitan area that is shown on that map, on that table. So for every city, from 1 to 10, okay. And you look, I did the same thing with Europe and then with Canada. Well, interestingly, there's few interesting stuff in there. If you look between New York and LA, which are the two biggest city, but also the most distanced from each other, there's 2,200 nautical mile between New York and Los Angeles. In Europe, the two cities that are the most distanced are 2,000 nautical mile, and in Canada we're close to 1,800,000 miles, 1,800 nautical miles. Sorry, apart from Montreal to Vancouver, okay, which are the two cities there that are mostly distanced. I didn't, as you may remark, I didn't include any cities from the Maritimes, because when you talk about major cities in the Maritime, we're below the 500,000 people there. So in maybe later, in 5-10 years from now, when the LCCs are well established, maybe they will want to venture a little more in the Maritime on a regular basis. But for now, I don't see the market. But overall, it's not bad. I mean, there's 23 million people living in Canada's top 10 cities. Now, there's a big difference between Canada, USA, and Europe. It's when you go up down to the smallest city of 1 million people. In Europe, there are 52 cities or urban area that have more than 1 million people, and it's 51 or 53 in the States. So going down, we can see that there's a lot of room in Europe and USA for growth for LCCs, which is not the same. In Canada, once you reach 15 or 28, 18 biggest city, then you're close to 100,000 people living. It goes down pretty fast after those first 10 cities. Okay, so the market for a Canadian LCC or ULCC is right there. Those 10 cities are right there. Now, there are a few tricky things. Okay, you gotta understand. In Canada, there is a law about Canadian duties, Canadian safety duties. Okay, so every time you take an aircraft, you pay you take a flight, you board a flight, you pay $7.50 for CATSA, Canadian Air Transport Safety Agency. So that fees is there to pay your screening, a security screening. It pays the hardware, but it also pays the people and all the administrations. So up to a maximum of $15 for a round trip. the fees is applicable to every passengers. The tricky thing is that the law comes with a designated airport list. Only the airport that are on this list, there's 78 of them right now, 75, 78 of them right now, are allowed to have screening system and to be to collect money from passenger being screening. Those 78 airports are the only one that's are allowed to do it. If you want to fly into an airport that's on the designated list, you have to do it from another airport from the designated list. That means if you build yourself a new airport, let's say a city of city, or let's try an example. Oshawa decides to build itself an airport. Okay, they don't consult nobody, Greater Toronto authorities. The city of Oshawa decides to build itself an airport, but they're not on the designated airport list. Any aircraft that would take off there would not be allowed to land on one of those airports in Canada that's it on the designated list. Now, Canadian government has opened up, changed the rules a little bit. It's possible now to get an airport being put on the designated airport list, but it has to be cost zero for the Canadian government. So that means that if a city that has an airport that's not on the list, they want to get on the list, well, they have to buy the screening material. They have to pay for the fees of the people of CATSA that's gonna work on the screening at the screening section. So, in other words, it won't cost anything to the Canadian government to have those. It would come back to the city or the owner of the airport to cover those fees. That's a big burden for those new small regional airports, and that tends to block LCCs from developing, away from those those major airports. In other words, right now, as it is, if you start an LCC and you want to fly between, let's say, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, well, you're gonna have to use those major airports. You won't be able to cut your landing fees because these are the only ones that are on the list. Maybe like on the south shore of Montreal, maybe Saint-Hubert will be on the list soon. They are working, but the city and the Chamber of Commerce has to find the funding for the CATSA, and that's a big problem. That's a big delay in spreading or LCC's growth in Canada. So, as you can see, there's probably room for, let's say, 25, 30 aircraft being operated by LCCs in Canada. But above that, major problem. I don't see, let's think about it. Look at Winnipeg, Calgary. How many 737 flight can you put between Winnipeg and Calgary without overflowing the market? There's all and that's the point I wanted to bring on today's video. It's that yes, there's room for LCCs in Canada, but there's a limit. We're not in Europe, we're not in USA. The growth won't be endless. It won't last for 20 years. After a few years of growth of all those four LCCs and new LCC, we'll see some of them starting to have problems. Because what they're gonna do once the market is gonna not the market, but when the market is going to be overflow, when there be too much offer, well, they're going to start lowering price to the point where they don't make profit anymore. So 5 years from now, I'd like to see where we're going to be, but I don't think we're going to have 4 LCCs, ULCCs in Canada. So that's it for today. If you're still watching this episode, that means you like it. So there's no reason you don't click the thumbs up at the bottom there. In the coming days, I'm going to Pratt and Whitney, USA, at Hartford, Connecticut. Pratt is doing a trade media show on Thursday about new propulsion system, new clean energy, and so there might be a chance that next episode from Wings Over Quebec on YouTube, it will probably be about that media event. So thank you for watching. See you next